My name's Jennifer Swenson and I live in North Oaks, Minnesota. My daughter Marit was diagnosed with DMG, H327KM, when she was 15 after a couple weeks of headaches. And she sadly and tragically passed away 6 months later. DIPG, or DMG, is a very, very aggressive brain tumor, most often found in pediatric patients. There's a few outliers, maybe a few adults every once in a while are diagnosed with it. And it's typically diagnosed in kids maybe ages like 5 to 12. But teenagers are also diagnosed with this very aggressive tumor. And it's been around for a long time. In fact, if you have heard of the astronaut Neil Armstrong, his daughter was diagnosed with this tumor, I think 50 some years ago, and died. And basically the type of treatment she got, which was radiation, is the same type of treatment that kids today with this type of tumor get. There's been some research and some different, efforts, but the fact is that there has been no medicine or chemotherapy found to be effective for these types of tumors. And so, pediatric brain tumors and pediatric cancer in general, there's really been only a few drugs, and they haven't even been for brain tumors, that have been approved specifically for children in the last 40 years. None for brain tumors, for pediatric brain tumors. And now pediatric brain tumors are the leading cause of cancer deaths in children, and that has just overtook leukemia in the past couple years. And one of the reasons is leukemia's had a lot of progress, and the most common type of leukemia has a 90% cure rate, whereas something like what my daughter had has a 0%, or they technically say less than 1%, but it's technically about 0% cure rate. There's a 5-year survival rate of 0 for DIPG. Marit was born super healthy baby, super smart. As a first-time parent, I went probably over and above on some of the things that a first-time a parent should do. Like, she had homemade baby food. I wouldn't let her suck on plastic. Once she got older, I was like, no, we don't need any extra chemicals in the house. So we didn't even use dryer sheets. I hated when she went to Bath and Body Works because I was like, oh, those lotions are all filled with weird chemicals. And we were very conscious of how we lived, like what we put on our lawns, any cleaning products, that kind of thing. So you would think, oh yeah, we lived a healthy life. She didn't have any major problems except for a couple, like seasonal allergies or something like that. So, and I'm not saying that to brag, saying, oh, we're this awesome, healthy family, but I'm just saying that, you can take every precaution possible. And even when she was a teenager, and got her phone, she wouldn't sleep with the phone in her room. She didn't have a clock next to her head. Laptops were out of the kids' rooms when they went to bed. So, I think there's this perception that some of these parents did something wrong, and when in fact there's been no environmental cause found at this point to cause these tumors. It's more kind of a developmental type of a thing is what they think. So anyway, Marit was a very healthy girl. And about, I want to say, a month to 3 weeks prior to her diagnosis, she started getting really bad headaches. And we brought her to several, I think we went to an urgent care, we went to a pediatrician, we went to an allergist, we went to the ER once, and then another time to the pediatrician. And all of them thought, oh, it's a migraine, oh, it's hormones, you drink more water, oh, get a nasal spray. And so on Valentine's Day, we went to the emergency room for the second time because her headaches were so bad. And they did an MRI and found a tumor the size of a small peach deep by her brainstem. And then from there, which was extremely traumatic, of course, I can't even really remember a lot of things that happened in those first few days. but I'm able to talk about it now, which is good. Anyway, the news kept coming because obviously we didn't know what it was right away, and then we knew it was a brain mass, and then we knew it was a tumor, and then a week later they did a 16-hour surgery to remove the tumor, but then we still didn't have the diagnosis, and then so we just kept getting worse and worse news. And then once we found out that it was this H3K27 mutation, we knew it was just really, really bad. But we still, of course, had hope, because that's the only thing you can have when you're in a situation like this. And Marit was a girl who really always could exceed expectations. She was a straight A student, athlete, really good on viola, that kind of thing. So we're like, well, something will come along, we'll be able to beat this. And we actually did the course of radiation, which we did the surgery and then the radiation. And just to clarify, this is where DIPG and DMG is a little different. In DIPG tumors, you can't surgically remove, so it's just radiation. With Marit's type, because of the location, our surgeon, and I don't think all surgeons could do this, but our surgeon went in and did the 16-hour surgery to remove most of the tumor, but it was so aggressive that those tumor cells kind of just infiltrated everywhere. And the radiation happened, and that was a success, but the aggressiveness of this mutation is really intense, and it came back. We did try a clinical trial in Chicago, and that's what we were hoping, that clinical trial would be the magic bullet to at least preserve her life for longer until something came along to cure it. And unfortunately that wasn't the case. And I think because she only had symptoms prior to her diagnosis for just a few weeks, truly that just shows how aggressive the tumor was and these DIPGs. So I think if she would have had a longer time of symptoms, then maybe that tumor wouldn't have been as aggressive, but that was our situation. Marit was just a truly beautiful and amazing person. She was beautiful not only on the outside, she had amazing freckles and a great smile, but she was just a beautiful person inside. She really was empathetic to people and loved people. She loved her brothers also very much, and she loved her mom, and she loved her dad. And we had just a really tight family with a lot of family fun, a lot of family vacations. She had this great relationship with each of her 4 brothers, but in a different way with each of them. And I think that was just such a wonderful legacy. At school, she had friends from so many different friend groups, which I think in a typical high school is maybe a little uncommon. She had her orchestra friends and her tennis friends and her friends for going out for coffee, and then she had friends from tennis from other schools, and just boys or girls, it really didn't matter. She was just a really well-loved and loving person, and she had a silly side and loved to laugh and have a lot of fun as well. Marit also was an extremely hard worker and very smart. I never had to tell her to do her homework or remind her to, get her things done. She was always organized and just kind of a really high-functioning student. But that wasn't the most important thing to her. The most important thing was her, her love for other people and just the way she cared about others in the world. One thing that I would love people to know is that this DMG, DIPG is a cancer where there's been no progress in 40, 50 years. It truly is one of the worst types of diagnosis that you can get. And these are all children that have, years and years ahead of them. And they're all innocent. There's no cause that they can determine. It's not like they've been exposed to secondhand smoke or that they all live in a place where there's bad water. I mean, these kids are all over the world. They are in Australia, they're in France, they're in England, they're in Saudi Arabia, and they get this tumor, and there's been no progress. And I think what's makes me angry is that there's been so much progress in other types of cancers, and sure, they might have more numbers, but these are young kids, and the 5-year survival rate is 0, and most kids die within a year. And you can't say that about probably any other cancer. We need research dollars and we need research experts to figure out how to stop this mutation from going nuts and killing these kids. So that's the one thing I think that I would like people to know, that this is an outrageous situation, and there's really no public outrage for DIPG. When I tell people that there's a 0% survival rate, I think people either don't want to know that because it's so terrible, or they think, oh, it can't happen to them, or they think, oh, well, childhood cancer, you survive it now. Well, leukemia, for the most common type, used to be a death sentence 70 years ago, and now it's a 90% cure rate. DMG, DIPG is 0. From what I know about one of the reasons there hasn't been a lot of progress is one of the reasons, and I'll try to use a little bit of a comparison, scientists need samples. They need to see how these tumors grow. And the standard of care, or the neurosurgeon's abilities, let's say 20 years ago, they thought it was best not to try to go in and get samples of the tumor because it was too dangerous. It's such a sensitive spot, and that's one of the reasons these kids die so quickly, because that part of the brain impacts breathing and swallowing and all that kind of thing. So for a long time, doctors, neurosurgeons wouldn't take specimen, or they wouldn't take tumor tissue to get the signs. Now they are, I think because of technology, they're able to go in and get some of those samples. And so like Marit's tumor, actually, they got it, and now it's being used for research. Whereas if you compare that to like a blood cancer, like a leukemia, well, they can just draw blood at some regular interval. And so they can see how drugs respond, they can see how cancers maybe mutate further. I mean, there's just a lot more opportunity to get some of that tissue. Same, I suppose, with skin cancer. So getting the tumor from these children was part of it, one of the reasons it was behind. But now I think they're able to get more, and they're trying to grow these tumor specimens in the lab to figure out how the medicines can possibly help. Personally, of course, as you get older, you realize that you can't control everything in life, and that it's just so extremely important to live every day to the fullest and take advantages of the life that you have in the days that you have them here on Earth. It's only been just slightly over 1.5 years since Marit died, and so truly I'm still working through the grieving process, because when you lose a child, that's one of the most, I think, terrible things that can happen. And so I might say something different 5 years out. Right now, every day is kind of up and down. I am trying very hard to live my life in honor of Marit. And we talk about Marit as a family. Her memory is a part of our life. We do things in honor of her as a family, and then we have some public things that I'm still working on, specifically how I can honor her more permanently with a foundation. But I'm trying to figure out what is the most effective way to help the cause of curing this terrible disease, and I want to make sure I'm focused my energies the right way with that. In November of 2018, I ran the New York City Marathon in honor of Marit for the National Brain Tumor Society. And the National Brain Tumor Society is an organization they want to cure all brain tumors, including pediatrics. And the one of their pediatric projects is called Project Impact, and that's a partnership with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and Dr. Susan Baker has a project where they're researching different potential applications to slow down this mutation. And so I raised about $40,000 for Project Impact through the National Brain Tumor Society, so that will go to research, which is wonderful. And then I just also, with the National Brain Tumor Society, did an advocacy day in Washington, D.C., where we lobbied, talked with all the legislators from the state of Minnesota, and there were other people doing other states. And that will make a difference. I'm pretty confident. Last year, the Senate and House of Representatives unanimously, and that's unanimously is a big deal nowadays because things don't happen unanimously, but they unanimously passed the Childhood Cancer STAR Act, which is the first time that there has been specific cancer funding for children in many, many years. And so that is a huge development because, as I mentioned earlier, childhood cancer really doesn't have the funding that the adult cancers have. In fact, typically up until this last year, only 4% of the National Cancer Institute budget goes to pediatric cancer. And of that 4%, an even smaller portion goes to pediatric brain tumors. So it's, so like the prostate cancers and the breast cancers and lung cancers, they get much, much more funding than pediatrics. So anyway, this Cancer STAR Act passed unanimously, and this year we went back to ask to make sure it gets funded year after year. One thing that I often think about is that there's just a lack of public outrage about this, and just because the public is outraged about so many different other things right now in our society, but yet this has been happening for years, for decades, and there's no outrage. And so that is one thing that I get frustrated about. There are a lot of things that are happening that do deserve public outrage, and I think this should be also one of those things.